How would you describe Jeffrey as a youngster when you were growing up?
Excuse me, doctor, if you don't mind. We don't know, we don't relate to Jeffrey.
Okay, Jeff.
He's Jeff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me ask you some things that, and I think these are right and accurate from your book. I understand that hindsight is 20/20, so I'm sure that these things will look different now. But Jeff was fascinated with a rotting animal carcass under the house and played with the bones and referred to them as fiddlesticks.
It was a terrible smell, so I went underneath and cleaned it out, the smell of the skunk, and cleaned out whatever else was under, cans and bones, and collected them all. And Jeff did seem to exhibit an interest in the way they clanked as he picked them up and put them back into the metal pail. He just laughed at it, the sound of it, and that was it.
It was said that he had even impaled a dog's head on a stick. And this, again, is something you only learned about in the trial.
The trial. I asked him about that, and he said that it was back in the woods, 2 neighbors away from us. I saw a picture of it.
So he admitted that that was true.
He said he found this dog. I don't know if it's really true, to be honest with you, but he told me that he found this dog that he decapitated and put on a stake.
And do you believe that there were warning signs that as a father you should have seen? If your kid is going around collecting dead animals, cutting them open and exploring them and that sort of thing, how do you not know that?
Well, as I said, it's heavily wooded, very rough terrain, and there are a lot of hiding places. He was extremely secretive and devious.
Tell me about the locked wooden box that you confronted him about.
On several occasions, my mother had complained about seeing some pornography around. So when I made the visit to Milwaukee, I saw this box in the closet in his room. I said, I'm going to open it. And I started going down to the basement to get a tool to open up the box. And he kept complaining that he couldn't even have 1 foot square of his own property to do with what he wants. And I said, I'm going to open it anyway, find out what's in here. Because that's what I thought it was, something related to pornography. And in fact, he convinced me to just wait till tomorrow, Dad, he said. And I'll open it for you then, but just don't do anything now. I don't want to disturb Grandma, because she was in a nearby room and she heard all this commotion that I was going through with Jeff. And so I'm in a way I'm glad, but in a way I'm not glad that I didn't press it, because if I would have opened that box and found what was in there, I think I would have lost it. Then the next day he opened it and he said, see, this is what it was. And in fact, he had stuffed some pornographic magazines in there.
But we now know the box contained a human head.
Yes.
And
it would have stopped. And I said, well, what would you have done, Jeff, if I'd opened it? And he said something like, the jig would have been up. Just something non-emotional, non-committal. More lives would have been saved.
how old was he when his mother left and took his brother?
Just turned 18.
What effect do you think it had when she left and took his brother but not him?
Sherry and I came upon our house, and Jeff was there all alone. And Jeff looked like an abandoned animal. Or how would you describe it?
Well, he was forlorn.
Yeah.
He stated later that he felt totally, it's the first time he felt so lonely. That's when he went out looking for someone to stay with him. He was so lonely.
That was the
He
first
felt
murder.
abandoned with
We
the hill.
didn't know he was left alone. And he had already done this first murder. He apparently felt so alone that he picked up this hitchhiker. And when this hitchhiker wanted to leave, he wanted him to stay so badly, he hit him with a barbell. And I kind of think that it was more of an accident than an intentional, thought-out killing.
Tell me, when you tried to deconstruct this in your mind and say, how in the world could this child that I laughed with, that I wrestled with, that used to run and jump on his grandmother and joy and excitement, how could he wind up to be this murderer, this serial killer?
I thought that he, at some point in his age 12 to 14, when he was coming out of puberty, his sexual engine, so to speak, was in high drive, and he was touching the insides of these animals, that he just sort of got hardwired neuronally into connecting the sexual pleasure with this type of activity, entrails, insides of bodies. That's the way I thought about it after thinking about it for a while. At first, I couldn't fathom how he turned out to be this far down the continuum. I mean, we're all on a continuum. We all do bad things. We all sin. He was at the extreme of this continuum. I couldn't at first understand how he could have done those things.
Did you ask him, did you say, Jeff, how in the world could you make this okay in your mind?
I was concentrating mostly on getting him into a psychiatric hospital. I didn't ask him that specifically, but I did tell him, Jeff, we've got to find out how on earth you could have done these things.
Have you spoken to any of the families of his victims?
We've spoken to several, but there was only one that we've become very close friends with, the sister of one of the victims. And to this day, we remain good friends with her.
If those families are watching this now on television, is there anything you want to say to them, either from you or on Jeff's behalf?
Well, I'm extremely, very, very sorry that it happened to their loved ones. And if I could have done anything to prevent it, I would have. And I would ask them to forgive Jeff for what he did. He's paid the price, I believe, now. That doesn't lessen their hurt, but ask their forgiveness. Like Teresa said to me, Lionel, I forgive. When he was murdered, Teresa said to me, Lionel, I forgive Jeff.
Do you forgive him?
Yeah, I forgive him now. I mean, it's really horrible to think of, to try to keep thinking of all the things he did, but even though he did all these horrible things, we forgive St. Paul for all the people that he killed in the name of God, in the name of Judaism. He was forgiven completely. And so if God can forgive, which is demonstrated in the scriptures, if God can certainly forgive St. Paul, the teaching is, of course, that anyone can be forgiven.
How about Lionel? Do you forgive him for his shortcomings in this drama and tragedy?
I'm not sure. I guess I was a little bit naive. I didn't think enough about, I was concentrating too much out of the premise that everything right with the spouse would automatically cause things to fall in place with the family. I just wish I had been I had a little bit more smarts to feel that I should be putting some of that effort with my son.
Do you think, in retrospect, that there were red flags, there were warning signs that you missed?
There definitely were warning signs that I missed, but I didn't believe it, or it's hard to believe. It really is. I'll give you one example. When he was about somewhere in the 11, 12 to 14 age range, he roamed around the country roads where we lived and gathered on his bike with big plastic bags the remains of various animals, foxes, you know, small dogs, animals that had been killed on the road, and took them back home. And ours was extremely heavily wooded lot, a very rough terrain, where he did, as I found out later, at the time of his so-called insanity trial, found out for the first time there that he did this. And he kept these animals and felt them, explored them, their insides, their entrails, and terrible things like that. Although I've had friends who have told me they've done the same sort of thing, but that would have been a red flag. This shows Jeff at a very, very early age. He had such a sweet disposition, sweet baby breath, and he was always happy. Christmas time was always a very happy time. It was a time when there were no real arguments. Jeff was always happy at Christmas time because there was a lot of things to eat. Easter was always important to him because he got his chocolate bunny. Thanksgiving was always spent with my family, and there was always a lot of love and attention given to Jeff. Jeff would always run towards me and jump in my arms. I would frequently carry Jeff on my shoulders or ride around on the handlebars of my bicycle. At this point, he's less than 7 years old, and he didn't go into his period of shyness until that point. Jeff, Dave, and his mother were happy, and I was happy that Jeff liked him and accepted him. They were 7 years apart, so I wouldn't say that they were extremely close in interests, but they did things together. Jeff really loved Frisky. He just loved the way Frisky paid attention to him and licked him and romped around with him. Jeff always had an interest in nature. He was very inquisitive. He liked biology class and in school, and we did several things together for science fair. This is at Grandma Dahmer's house.
He loved his grandmother dearly.
Yeah.
He knew it was unconditional love.
Yeah.
Grandma never judged anything. He was just loved.
Packed his lunch when he went to work, when he was staying with her in Milwaukee. Made dinner for him. Was always concerned about everything he did. Jeff did a lot of riding on his bike on the rural roads. That's the bicycle that we learned that he had used with big plastic bags to travel around the rural roads to pick up roadkill. He was 12 to 14 years old. The happy little boy. And yet this was when he was 12 years old. So it was sort of at the beginning of this strange association between roadkill and his sexual urges. Things were forming in his mind that you can't see just by looking at a picture. He looks like a happy youth there.
Do you have a story or a question for me? Click the link in the description and tell me what in the world is going on.